advocacy for greater cross-regional security cooperation, which I underscored during last year's Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. As it was then, so it remains. The threats and the threat actors that we face are increasingly intertwined. Asians doing battle in European soil. And in the maritime domain, we see common challenges in Europe and in the Indo-Pacific by actors of similar persuasion. As our adversaries align, we should not fragment. Against this backdrop, we have come to Paris with a call for convergence between Europe and the United States on the one hand, and between Europe and Asia on the other, to preserve the rules-based international order. I do not claim any originality with this, because this is an echo of what happened in Singapore during last year's Shangri-La Dialogue. The UN, he wrote, and I quote, "What Europe does best is to reinforce the legal principles of free navigation and support the legitimacy of regional actors that depend on international law as their first line of defense against predatory behavior. Europe lends valuable moral weight to deterrence, even as it is compelled to focus more on challenges closer to home." In that spirit, the Philippines is grateful to France and other like-minded partners in Europe for their support for international law, particularly the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 Arbitral Award on the South China Sea. This year marks the 10th year anniversary of this historic award. This landmark ruling affirmed UNCLOS as the peremptory document that defines maritime entitlements, and no amount of contrivance or distortion can derogate from it. Yet, the People's Republic of China, upon which this award is legally binding, not only continues to ignore it, but is actively waging a campaign of misinformation and disinformation at all levels to nullify. The activities of China in this sphere are well publicized to the world because of the Transparency Initiative in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea, which has been entered into by several interested countries, particularly the Philippines. Even in domestic issues and politics, China continues to wage a campaign in order to undermine our determination to pursue our rightful claims under international law. Yet, my presence here signals the commitment of the Marcos administration not to waver, but to stay the course for our own people and especially for future generations of Filipinos. Against this backdrop, cross-regional convergence is essential to upholding international law and safeguarding smaller countries, especially archipelagic ones, once again, whose communities rely on the bounty of the sea. This is why we fought for UNCLOS in the first place. We recall that in the late 20th century, the Chinese government advocated for UNCLOS based on the rationale of anti-hegemony. China aligned itself with developing countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America For instance, in 1974, it very strongly and consistently advocated for a robust regime for the exclusive economic zone, arguing that it was entirely proper and reasonable for the developing states to defend their national sovereignty, safeguarding their natural resources, and develop their national economies after having, quote, long suffered from aggression and plunder at the hands of colonialists and imperialists, unquote. I wish to remind them of those words. Now that the shoe is on the other foot, it seems to have been lost somewhere. And we are following what they preached. So how can we be wrong? They are harming the archipelagic countries that the law was designed to shield against the unilateral actions of stronger states. So I made the case on that. In the face of these challenges, it's important to know, diplomacy is important, but it has its limits. Our diplomatic efforts complement our national security, but they cannot substitute for a credible deterrent posture, which is why we are all here as defense professionals. Because without a strong backbone, smaller countries risk having their agency usurped by major powers. As I am sure you will understand, being defense and military practitioners, we also need deterrence. Recently, NATO countries committed to spending 5% of their GDP on defense. The Philippines, like its neighbors in Southeast Asia, is likewise strengthening, albeit in a less drastic way because of the fact that our budgets are constrained for basic human necessities and infrastructure. However, we realize that a defense capability upgrade is long overdue. And the sad lesson we learned here in the European continent is cannot be neglected, because it will bite you at the time you least expect it, and to transition to augmenting your defense deterrence capabilities will be very painful. The challenge now is how to ensure these capabilities are used to pursue an end that we all share: the defense of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and democratic freedoms around the world. These ideals are not new to us. It was from here, on this continent, after we were colonized from this continent, that our forebears had their first taste of freedom, which influenced their emerging national consciousness and eventually our struggle for independence. The roots and ideas were perfected in this continent. Indeed, our national hero, Jose Rizal, spent part of his youth here in Paris. In 1883, he wrote to his parents about Voltaire and Rousseau, two Enlightenment figures which he described as the fathers of modern thought. Another of our heroes, Andres Bonifacio, never set foot in France. Yet he too was inspired by the French Revolution and its ideals of liberté, égalité, and fraternité. I hope I pronounced that right. Then as now, we share the same values. And it is on this shared foundation that we must continue to converge and bridge the distance between Europe and Asia. I hope I have done justice to my task to make the case for cross-regional convergence, no matter how remote, and I will be ready to take it. And by convergence, we should interpret convergence in the broad sense, which means unity of purpose, where we both could either interoperate in one area or operate in our respective areas to achieve a common goal, using our own unique capabilities, expertise, and areas of influence. We should be as creative as possible to converge and to work towards convergence to address threats and mitigate vulnerabilities, of which we are seeing several now. We need no treaties to pursue such partnerships, because this is our inherent responsibility as defense officials, to protect our people, to protect others, to protect and preserve the global order. Excuse me. We need no treaties. This is immediately executory and doable. Our convergence in goal or objective is necessary to protect human life, uphold international law, and defend the territory and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of smaller and especially archipelagic countries, especially those who are besieged by larger neighbors. From our perspective, recent threats have underscored the urgent need for this. The Philippines is not directly involved in conflicts in Europe and in the Middle East. Yet, like any other country, we have felt the consequences. Most immediately, through direct threats to the safety of Filipinos who are in the Middle East, 2.4 million of them. And immediately through sharp increases in commodity prices, the Philippines being a net importer of oil. Millions of Filipinos, as I said, live and work overseas. In the Middle East, 2.4. In fact, in the international arena, 1 in every 3 of a seafarer manning an international flying ship is a Filipino. 1 in 3. Our healthcare professionals form the backbone of providing healthcare to both Europeans and Americans. And much to our regret, our people have been counted among those who are casualties from attacks both on land and at sea. In this context, we need cross-regional convergence to protect human life, not only to propound state objectives and international order. In this most atomic of an endeavor, we can immediately work with each other. Evidently though, on the other context, the rules-based international order is not perfect. Yet for smaller countries like the Philippines, it is indispensable for us. We rely on international law and institutions to maintain not only for international peace and security, which is essential to our growth and survival, not only as a matter of principle, but also out of necessity. Without an expeditionary armed force, for example, the Philippines has to depend on the international system to protect our nationals wherever they may be, while we are in the process of strengthening ourselves to enable us to do so in the future, which is an obligation from which we will not shirk, and it is an obligation which we realize. The Philippine government, under the leadership of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is surely strengthening our capabilities to ensure the safety and well-being of overseas Filipinos. A big part of this is strengthening first our armed forces to protect our exclusive economic zone and other areas where we have jurisdiction, and thereafter to be an expeditionary armed force to protect in conjunction with all other like-minded partners, our people, and those of others who are essential to international safety, international trade, and international commerce.